Number 144 will be our song before we begin our class this morning. 144.
Defender, the Ancient of Days, provision in splendor, and girded with praise. Will you bring on earth and feeble and frail, and lead you we trust, nor finally to fail. Thy mercies how tender, how firm to the end. Our Maker, Defender, Redeemer, and Friend.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, being part of our Sunday morning Bible class. We're glad that you're here. We always have a list of folks we need to remember in prayer this week. Lauren Moore continues at North Mississippi Medical Center, along Sean McCoy's and the Corinth Hospital. Sue Glenn is in the Tupelo Hospital. We've also been asked to remember Evelyn Jameson, James Lovelace, Mark Williams, George Starst, Blair Chapman, Nada Bullock, and Juanice Floyd. So we need to remember all of these in our prayers. You know, one of the great things about being part of the Booneville Church is about all of the things that are going on. Last week we talked about it wasn't what God was going to ask you what somebody else was doing. He's going to ask you what you're doing. You know, and we have a lot of things that are going on at the Booneville Church. Some of them you may not ever realize, but we do have a lot of different things going on that are that are reaching out into the community around us. And I would kind of like to spotlight at least one of those. But this week there's so much. Steve Hodgen and his wife, they are at Rolling Fork this morning. He's preaching down there today. And his wife Lisa will be getting a group together. They're leaving tomorrow, going down to Texas. Be down there for a few days. You saw the crates in the back. They'll be taking those crates. What they'll do with that is that they will go into homes and pack up possessions, the people's possessions that they want to keep, and so they'll be down there helping to do that and surveying, seeing what all needs to be done in that part of the country. So they'll be leaving tomorrow, going down there. But this morning I want to just kind of highlight something that's going on in our prison ministry, and especially in the end of the correspondence courses. Okay. You know, we have a large correspondence course that's 263. That folks that have been that are incarcerated, they want to study the Bible, they want to hear what all things are going on. And we have some ladies that are working in that, Marilyn Martin, Sue Mason, and some others have been part of that. And I just wanted to give you an idea of how these folks feel. I've got some letters, and they receive about 40 to 50 every week or more. And most of them have 2 or 3 new folks that they would like to have added to the list. And this is all over the state. In fact, it's all over the country. Here's one that Sue Mason received. It says, "Thank you for reaching out to people like me in prison to send Bible studies. May God bless you." And that one was from, I think that one was from Greenville, Mississippi, the prison in Greenville. Down in Pearl, Mississippi. It says, "I've been reading a lot in the Bible but I have not been raised in the Bible. I've really wanted to learn all that's available. And that was a lady from Greenville, Mississippi. This one came from Meridian, Mississippi. I won't read the whole thing, just part of it. It says, I'm serving 15 years for robbery. I was really bad in drugs and robbed a man for money. I'm so thankful that God has delivered me from all of that, and now I actually can live my life for Jesus. I'm a whole new person now. I thank God daily for that. Another one from Greenville, Mississippi. It says, I'm very interested in being a participant in your Bible study. Please begin to send the lessons to me. I've turned my life over to Christ. I'm wanting to learn everything possible about my Savior. Could you please help me? Now, this is just an idea. This just gives you an idea of some of the things that are taking place every day in that correspondence course. So we have and that's just one of the many works that this congregation is involved in. And we only do it because we have people that are willing to do it, that are willing to step out of their comfort zone sometimes and do things that are a little different, because there are almost 300 folks getting Bible correspondence courses now. How many did you do last? 263 last week. Okay. So that's just one of the many things that's going on. If you don't have one of the lesson sheets, just hold up your hand. One of these guys will bring you one. And today we'll be looking at Judges chapter 3. Judges chapter 3. We'll actually cover the first 3 judges very quickly. It said that the weapons that we fight with are not the weapons of this world. You know, and that was the Apostle Paul saying that we don't fight with the same weapons that everybody else does. If we are a Christian, we are engaged in a battle, and we're fighting with Satan every day. And it's not the same kind of weapons that you would think of when you think about the weapons of warfare, because God uses different kinds of weapons, all kind of different weapons. On the sheet it says, when God goes to war, He usually chooses the most unlikely soldiers, hands them the most unusual weapons, and accomplishes through them the most unpredictable results. God uses things that people wouldn't even think about. And as we go through Judges and in other places in the Old Testament, we see Shamgar, who used an ox goad to kill 600 people. Jael used a hammer, and we'll talk about her next week, to kill the leader of an army. And she used a hammer and a tent peg. Gideon, we all know the story of Gideon, used pitchers and torches to rout the whole Midianite army. Samson, he just used the jawbone of a donkey and killed 1,000 people. David, he used a smooth river rock to kill a giant. God uses unusual weapons, things that we don't even think about. And God uses these for His glory. And we need to remember that we are in a fight. We are in a fight with Satan. Today we want to look at 3 different things. We want to look at the power that we as Christians can use. We want to look at strategy. And then the third thing we want to look at is courage. And these are 3 things that these individual judges exhibited: power, strategy, and courage. The very first one we want to look at is Othniel, who used the power of God. And if you have your Bible, let's start in Judges chapter 3, verses 1 through 4. It says, "Now these are the nations which the Lord left, that He might test Israel by them. That is, all who had not known any of the wars in Canaan. This was only so that the generations of the children of Israel might be taught to know war at least those who had not formerly known it, namely 5 lords of the Philistines, all the Canaanites, the Sidonites, the Havites, who dwelt in Mount Lebanon, from Mount Baal Hermon to the entrance of Hamath. And they were left that he might test Israel by them, to know whether they would obey the commandments of the Lord, which he had commanded of their fathers at the hand of Moses. God left some people there. The children of Israel didn't do what they were supposed to do. We know that they were commanded over and over. When you get to the land, the promised land, you wipe out these people, you move them out, you send them to other places. But they didn't do that. And we notice here that God had mercy on them. He allowed them to be tested, to use these people to test them. You know, if God had really been hard on Israel and had been judging Israel, he would have took vengeance on them because they didn't do what they were supposed to do, but he spared them. And not only did he spare them, he used these people that were left to make to teach them lessons, to teach them about warfare. You see, they were surrounded. Everywhere they looked, there was somebody wanting to eliminate them. They didn't have peace because they were surrounded by folks that wanted to drive them out. But God used that. God used that to teach them a lesson, to teach them how to be prepared. He used this to train Israel because he knew Israel would always be surrounded by enemies. You know, God had built up a wall around his people. He had protected them. And yet, it wasn't God that tore the wall down. It was the children of Israel that tore that wall down. And they were going to need to know how to protect themselves. When you look forward about 2,000 years or more, well, about 3,000 years from here, and you look at the nation of Israel today, isn't it in the same situation that it was in the time of the judges? Isn't it surrounded by people that would like to destroy them at any minute? All through the centuries, the children of Israel have always had to have a standing army because there's always somebody wanting to test them, wanting to try them, and are willing to destroy them at any minute. So God used the remnant of the people that were left to test the children of Israel. They were being tested here. Let's look at the anger of God. Verses 5 through 8. Thus the children of Israel dwelt among the Canaanites, the Havites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites. And they took their daughters to be their wives, and they gave their daughters to their sons, and they served their gods. So the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. They forgot the Lord their God, and they served the Baals and the Ashtaroths. Therefore the anger of the Lord was hot against them, and he sold them into the hand of Cushan Risaphath, king of Mesopotamia, and the children of Israel served Cushan Risaphath for 8 years. Notice here he says that he sold them. At least 4 times in the book of the Judges you'll see this expression that God sold them into slavery. Here were people that had taken up all of the bad habits of the inhabitants of the land. This is what Moses had warned them against. Don't take up the bad habits. Notice that he says that they took daughters of the pagans for their wives. and they allowed the daughters of Israel to be married to them, they began to become accustomed to the things that they were living, to the conditions in which they were living. Are we immune to that today? If you would allow me just a minute to go back through some of the things that we as a people here in the state of Mississippi. I'm not talking about people that live in other places. I'm talking about us. You know, at one time, prior to 1966, the whole state of Mississippi was considered as a dry state. Does that mean that people didn't drink? No, it didn't. The state of Mississippi prior to 1966 had a black market tax. They collected tax on liquor, but it didn't mean it wasn't sold here. It was. But the state of Mississippi collected tax. But you know, the politicians in Jackson's got together and they decided that, you know, it'd be good. We're losing money. We're losing money. Let's just pass of what's called the local option law that we live under today. And let's put restrictions on the sale of alcohol throughout the whole state. And only those counties that want it will be allowed to sell it. If you remember, what did they say that was the reason behind this? Besides that we're losing money, more money, but we'll never have to raise taxes for education again in the state of Mississippi. We will pay for our education. We'll have one of the finest education systems in the country. Did it happen? No. We're still on the bottom, aren't we? Then comes along several years later, when they began to talk about casino gambling. We need to raise taxes so that we can have a fine education system in the state of Mississippi. The laws were passed so that we could have casino gambling in the state. Where's our education today? It's still on the bottom. What happened? Money got diverted to other things. And you know, we can go through a whole list of things. Right now, the legislature is looking at a lottery. And they want to raise money through a lottery. My point is this. When you are trying to run your state government on money that you're going to raise from sale of alcohol, from gambling, from lottery, from the legalization of marijuana, are you not setting yourself up just like the children of Israel did here? Aren't you saying that we know these things are bad, but let's make money off of them? Sometimes we need to stop and look at what we as a people are doing. Are we getting closer to God because we are able to sell alcohol, have gambling, have a lottery, to have legalized marijuana? Is this moving us closer to God? Or is it moving us as a people further away from God? The nation of Israel during this time was moving farther and farther away from God. They were tearing down those walls that God had established. And I wonder sometimes if we as a people, if we're not tearing down those walls. When we're reading through verse 7, it says that they did evil in the sight of the Lord and they fought against their God. that they forgot the Lord their God and they served the Baals. At some point in their time, they had moved so far away from God that they started serving the idols. And it says that the anger of God was against them. And He sold them like slaves. He put them into bondage for 8 years. They had forgot that it was God who made the heavens and the earth. It was God that had come to Egypt and led them out so that they could have the prosperity that they had. It was God that had protected them all of these years. And they had not obeyed what God had told them to do. Instead, they had trusted in the gods of their neighbors. And these were gods that were contrary to the law. And they were spending their time. Is it any wonder that God was angry with these people? Because they had turned their back on Him. Let's look at the salvation. One thing's on the sheet there. It says that God never allows His people to sin successfully. You're not going to be successful in your sinning because God will one day punish it. That there will be a day coming. The salvation of His people, beginning of verse 9. When the children of Israel cried out to the Lord raised up a deliverer of the children of Israel who delivered them, Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. Notice verse 10. It says, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he judged Israel, and he went out to war, and God delivered Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia, in his hands, and his hands prevailed over Cushan-Rishathaim, and the land had rest for 40 years. Then Othniel, the son of Kenaz, died. God raised up a person. He raised up a man. And he reached back and he got Othniel. And it says that he was the son of Caleb's brother, Caleb's younger brother. This was the same person that we had talked about last week, who had taken part of the land of Hebron. You know, when Caleb was one of the 12 spies, and Joshua gave him an inheritance in the land, and Caleb had offered this city offered if whoever could take the city that would have his daughter as a wife, Asa. We talked about that last week. If you have your map, Mesopotamia is way up here, and Hebron is in the southern part. It's in the southern part of Israel. He had come a long way if Othniel was the one that was going to deliver him. It came the whole length of Israel. And Othniel was raised up by God. Othniel, it says that the Spirit of God was upon him. Where did his power come from? It came from the Spirit of God. When the Holy Spirit was on Othniel, he became a conqueror. Now, I'm sure he was just a normal person before this. But Othniel, through the Spirit of God, he was able to become more than a conqueror. And he was able to rescue the children of Israel out of bondage. They'd been in bondage for 8 years, and he was able to do it. Where did the power come from? It came from the Spirit of God. God gave him the power to do what he was doing. We should never underestimate the good that one person can do who's filled with the Spirit of God and a person that's willing to obey the will of God. And Othniel was that person. The very first judge of Israel was filled with the Spirit. What can we do? What can we do if we're filled with the Spirit of God? If we have that different kind of spirit? If we decide that we want to go out and to do something great for God, and God is with us, what can stop us? We can do great things if we're filled with God's Spirit. And with God's help, we can do things that we can't even imagine. Othniel was one of those people. He was one of those that was filled with the Spirit. The second judge, Ehud. Ehud had a great strategy. This is in Judges chapter 3, verses 12 through 30. You know, unlike Moses that appointed Joshua as the leader, after Joshua, there was no appointed leader. But when God's people cried out and God answered their prayer, He would reach down and find a person. Find that person that was filled with the Spirit. Find that person who could do something. And you would think that after a person like Othniel, who ruled for 40 years, that they would understand that if they stayed close to God, these things are not going to happen to us. But over time, they turned their back on God again. They turned away from Him. And God would have to put them back into bondage, and then He would have to deliver them again. And then they would fall away again. That's part of the cycle in the book of Judges. And you'll see it over and over and over again. But this time it was from the king of Moab. Let's look at verses 12 through 14. Then the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. That's a familiar saying there in Judges, isn't it? So that the Lord strengthened Eglon, king of Moab, against Israel, because they had done evil in the sight of the Lord. And He gathered Himself the people of Ammon and Amalek, and He went and defeated Israel and took possession of the city of Palm. So the children of Israel served Eglon, king of Moab, for 18 years. If you have your map, you'll see that Moab is down here in on the eastern side of the Dead Sea. It's down lower. And he went to Jericho, and he set up his headquarters in Jericho. So he had to go up the side of the Dead Sea through the inheritance of Reuben and Gad and cross over the Jordan River, which is part of the tribe of Benjamin. And he had set up his headquarters there in Jericho. Jericho was a condemned city. It doesn't say that the city had been rebuilt, but it says that he used it for a strategic purpose. And there was plenty of water there. There was a fording of the Jordan River there. It was a good place to set up, and he could control a large amount of the land of Israel from that place. And he did so for 18 years. So he had a good thing going. Children of Israel were being put under subjection. And it lasted for 18 years. And let's look at verse 15. But the children of Israel cried out to the Lord, and the Lord raised up a deliverer, Ehud, son of Gr, the Benjamite, a left-handed man. By him the children of Israel sent tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. God raised up a person here, Ehud. And I'm sure if you were to go through a list of people that you would want to be raised up, Ehud probably wouldn't be on that list. It says he was a Benjamite. And if you'll notice on the map that Benjamin is right there in the middle of the country. Part of Jerusalem is part of the inheritance of the Benjamites. As you read there, it talks about he was a Benjamite, a left-handed man. Some of the commentators seem to think that he did not have use of his right hand. The reason they put he was a left-handed man. And if that premise is true, he had a whole lot of things to overcome before he could become useful for God. And let's just assume this morning for our purposes that Ehud probably didn't have use of his right hand. It may be withered, it may have been lost in an accident or something, but for some reason he primarily used his left hand. God used a person with some kind of disability to do something that was great, to deliver His people. And God used him in a way that we have to say he was ingenious, because he formed a tremendous strategy. He had a lot of problems to overcome if he was going to pull this off. You know, God used Ehud in a way that we'll never understand. Verse 16 and 17. Now Ehud made for himself a dagger. It was a double-edged, about a cubit in length, and he fastened it under his clothes on his right thigh. So when he brought tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. Now Eglon was a very fat man. Part of his strategy was, how am I going to get into the king? How am I going to do this without raising a lot of suspicion? Here was his way. He was going to take the tribute. You know, all of the kings wanted to have tribute. It made them feel good when someone that they were over brought tribute to them. And especially from the children of Israel. You see, that these were not foreigners in this case that were causing the children of Israel so much trouble. These were close kin. See, in Moab, the descendants of Moab, they were basically kin. Lot's nephew was the person that they looked to as the founder of Moab, because through Lot, who was the nephew of Abraham, came Moab and Ammon. These were descendants through Lot. The Amalekites, Esau was the brother of Jacob. Was the first person of the Amalekites. So these were almost kinfolks that were doing this to one another. So they were hurting folks that were close kin to them. But it didn't make them any difference as long as they were having dominance over the children of Israel. They weren't too concerned about the family connections. And back to the strategy now. He was able to overcome the first problem, how to get to the king. And that was to be able to carry the tribute. Take the tribute to the king. He'll be willing to see you if you're the one that's bringing the tribute. The second problem he had was how to secure a private audience with the king. Verse 18. And when he had finished presenting the tribute, he sent away the people who had carried the tribute. But he himself returned back from the stone images that were at Gilgal, and he said, I have a secret message. And he said, keep silence. All who attended him went out from him, so Ehud came in. He wanted a private audience, and here he's getting it simply by saying, I have a secret message from you from God. So Ehud came to him while he was sitting in his upstairs in his cool private chambers, and then Ehud said, I have a message to you from God. So he arose from his seat. Then Ehud reached with his left hand, took the dagger from his right thigh, and thrust it into his belly. Even the hilt went in after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade, for he did not draw out the dagger from his belly, and his entrails came out. Notice he was able to overcome the second part because he was had a secret message. At least this is what he told Eglon. Did I have a secret message? You know, if you were a king of a conquered people, and someone comes and says, I have a secret message from God, wouldn't you feel special that God is sending me a message? So in his arrogance, Eglon allowed Ehud to come in for a private meeting. And notice it says that he stood, because you'd have to stand to hear a message from God. And he stood, and that allowed Ehud to carry out his plan. You know, if you go to visit a dignitary today, a politician, the president, you know, they're going to search you when you go in. But it seems like that Ehud used his disability as a way to get around being searched. Because how would a person, a lowly Israelite, with a withered hand or a hand that's not used, a right hand, how much danger could he be to a king? And yet it was part of his strategy, because he used that disability he had, and he reached with his left hand to his right thigh and took out his dagger, and he thrust it into the belly of the king. Ehud had a tremendous strategy, didn't he? But that wasn't all of his problems. Another thing is, how do you get out? Once you have done this deed, how are you going to get out of this situation? Verse 23 through 26. Then Ehud went out through the porch and shut the doors of the upper room behind him and locked them. And when he had gone out, Eglon's servants came to look, and to their surprise, the doors of the upper room were locked. So they said, he is probably attending to his needs in the cool chamber. So they waited until they were embarrassed, and still he had not opened the doors to the upper room. Therefore they took the keys and opened it, and there was their master fallen dead on the floor. And Ehud had escaped while they delayed and passed beyond the stone images and escaped to Shira. Ehud had a plan to get out. As he was leaving, he locked the maybe the king was taking care of himself, maybe taking a nap, doing something. And it says that he stayed there, that they allowed Ehud to leave, and he went out and he left the palace. He was gone by the time that they decided to go unlock the doors and check on the king. Ehud had made his escape. You know, these things didn't just happen. They had to have been planned. Ehud had a plan, and he carried out his plan. But that's still not the end of it. You know, if you take down the king, you still have an army out there to take care of. What are you going to do? If you've killed the king, you've raised the anger of an army. And you need another plan. You need to know what you're going to do after you've got them all stirred up. You know, it doesn't do any good to throw a rock at a hornet's nest if you're trying to take it down. That only stirs them up. You got to have another plan if you're going to take down the nest. And Ehud had a plan, and he carried out his plan. Beginning in verse 27. And it happened, notice that it says, and it happened. You think that God had a part in this? That it just happened? I think not. I think God was there all the time, helping Ehud to be successful in this, in what he was doing. And it happened when he arrived that he blew the trumpet in the mountain of Ephraim, and the children of Israel went down with him from the mountains, and he led them. Now, if you'll notice on your map, you'll see that Ephraim is to the west of Jericho and to the north. So he had a place that he was going to. He was a Benjamite, but he went to Ephraim because Ephraim probably had a better army than the Benjamites. At least they were bigger. And he went to the mountains of Ephraim, and the children of Israel went down with him from the mountains, and he led them. And he said to them, "Follow me, for the Lord has delivered your enemies, the Moabites, into your hands." So they went down after him, seized the fords of Jordan leading to Moab, and did not allow anyone to cross over. And at that time they killed about 10,000 men of Moab, all stout men of valor. Not a man escaped. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land had rest for 80 years. Ehud had a plan. When you cross over when you cross out of Jericho, his plan was to go to Ephraim because they probably had the biggest army. And you arouse those people, and you go down and you seize the fords at the Jordan River. This did two things. It stopped the Moabites from crossing back over into going home, and it also stopped them from receiving reinforcements. Ehud had a strategy, and God was with him. One man with a withered right hand and an 18-inch dagger caused the death of 10,000 of the troops of Moab. One man. Think what we can do when we have a strategy and we have the power of God behind us. What all can we as God's people accomplish? One more judge, and poor old Shamgar got one verse. Notice it says, after him Shamgar, the son of Anath, who killed 600 men of the Philistines with an ox goad, he also delivered Israel. And that's all that it says about Shamgar. He used an ox goad. It was a long stick, about 8 feet long. It had a metal point on one end and had a spade on the other. It was used to prod the ox when you're plowing. And the spade on the other end was used to clean the plow. And it says that he was able to kill 600 Philistines. It doesn't say if he killed them all at one time or if that was an accumulative total. But it says that one man with an agricultural instrument was able to kill 600 Philistines. One man with the power of God, with a good strategy, and with the courage of Shamgar, can do remarkable things. We need to take the lessons that's taught here about Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, and realize that God will do amazing things through us because He has the power. We can form the strategy, but it takes courage. That's all of our time today. Thank you for being here. Next week we'll look at chapters 4 and 5.